Welcome to today's commentary. In this episode, we're going to journey back in time. Far back, to an ancient land, to a story woven with threads of deep hardship, unwavering loyalty, and ultimately, a profound, beautiful redemption. It's the timeless narrative of Ruth and Boaz, a story that gently reminds us of God's unwavering faithfulness, even in life's most challenging, most uncertain seasons. It's a narrative that illuminates the concept of redemption in ways that speak directly to our own hearts, our own quiet longings. Our journey begins in the heartland of Judah, specifically in the humble, fruitful town of Bethlehem, during a tumultuous period when judges ruled. It was a time marked by both divine promise and human peril. A season when daily life, livelihoods, and even survival could shift dramatically, often dictated by the harsh realities of the land itself and the faithfulness, or lack thereof, of its people. In this Bethlehem, a family lived a quiet existence. Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their two beloved sons, Mahlon and Chilion. For a time, their days unfolded with the rhythm of agricultural life, perhaps even feeling unremarkable. But then, the whisper of distant troubles grew into a deafening roar. Hardship arrived. A severe famine began to grip the land. It wasn't just a lean season. It was a devastating scarcity, stripping away every ounce of livelihood, wilting their crops, silencing the laughter that once echoed through their fields. The very ground that had sustained them now lay barren, forcing Elimelech and his family to face an agonizing, life-altering choice. With heavy hearts, surely burdened by desperation, Elimelech decided they must leave their ancestral home, their familiar people, and their cherished world behind. They made the arduous migration to the country of Moab, a foreign land, seeking desperately for refuge and sustenance for their family. Can you imagine that journey? The quiet desperation in their steps, the deep, gnawing uncertainty of starting entirely anew in a place where customs, language, and even gods were different. But even in Moab, a land they hoped would offer respite, sorrow continued its relentless, cruel pursuit. The first blow struck. Naomi's husband, Elimelech, passed away, leaving her a grieving widow, alone in a strange country. The weight of this loss was immense. Then, tragically, the silence of grief was shattered again, as her two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, also died. This left Naomi utterly bereft, stripped of her husband, her children, her entire direct lineage. Her two Moabite daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, were also left as young widows, their own futures suddenly undone. A chilling emptiness must have settled over Naomi's life. Everything she had known, everything that had given her security, her purpose, her identity, seemed to have vanished like mist in the morning sun. She was left with nothing but unbearable grief, and these two foreign daughters-in-law, in a land that was fundamentally not her own. A place where, she surely felt, the Lord's hand had dealt her only bitterness. Naomi, consumed by her pervasive grief and an overwhelming sense of utter loss, finally decided it was time to return to her homeland, to Bethlehem. Every step homeward must have been heavy with memories, each one a stark reminder of all she had lost. She truly felt that the Lord had dealt bitterly with her, so that in her deep despair, she even asked to be called Mara, meaning bitter, instead of Naomi, meaning pleasant. It was a raw acknowledgement of the sorrow that had enveloped her very being. As they began their long, arduous journey back to the familiar hills of Judah, a difficult and selfless decision weighed heavily on her heart regarding her two Moabite daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth. In an act of selfless love, born out of her own pain, Naomi urged them to return. To go back to their own mothers' homes, to their own people, and significantly to their own gods. She wished for them to find the security and the new husbands that she felt she could no longer provide among her kin in Israel. May the Lord grant that you find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. She blessed them, her voice undoubtedly heavy with emotion, perhaps even cracking with the weight of her sacrifice. Can you imagine that moment? A true crossroads of destiny. 3 grieving women, standing on a dusty road, facing an uncertain future, each grappling with a choice that would define the rest of their lives. It was a poignant test of loyalty, a deeply personal decision for each woman. Orpah, after much heartfelt weeping and a difficult internal struggle, decided to heed Naomi's counsel. With tears, she kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, turning back toward the familiar comforts and customs of Moab. Her choice, though entirely understandable and seemingly pragmatic, meant she would remain within her known world, within the embrace of her own people and her known gods. But Ruth clung to Naomi. Her heart, though undoubtedly broken by her own losses, was bound by an extraordinary, inexplicable love and an emerging, quiet faith that drew her not just to Naomi, but to Naomi's God. Naomi, perhaps testing her resolve one last time, pleaded with her again, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." Yet, Ruth's response was not just a refusal, but one of the most powerful and beautiful declarations of loyalty and devotion found anywhere in Scripture. With a resolve that transcended comfort, security, and even common sense, she said, her voice clear and steadfast, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go I will go, and where you lodge I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more also if anything but death parts me from you." This wasn't merely an emotional outburst, a fleeting promise in a moment of distress. It was a covenant, a selfless act of choosing radical faithfulness in the face of immense hardship. Ruth was embracing not just Naomi, but specifically Naomi's God, the God of Israel. She was exchanging everything known and comfortable for the utterly unknown, forsaking her past, her Moabite heritage, for a future rooted entirely in a new faith, a new people. Her declaration speaks volumes about her extraordinary character, a woman of unwavering commitment, deep integrity, and an intuitive understanding of true love and devotion. She chose a path of radical devotion, believing, perhaps without fully understanding the intricate plan, that her future lay intertwined with the faithfulness of Naomi's God, even when all human comfort and security seemed utterly stripped away. This choice, born out of love and enduring loyalty, is the very first, pivotal step on her remarkable path toward redemption. And so, after their long and arduous journey, Naomi and Ruth finally arrived in Bethlehem at the very beginning of the barley harvest. Imagine the scene that greeted them. 2 weary, travel-worn women, one bent with sorrow and the weight of her losses, the other a foreign stranger in a land she had never known, stepping into a town that once knew Naomi as full of life and promise, but now saw her return utterly empty. The entire town was stirred because of them. Whispers and curious glances surely followed their quiet, poignant arrival. "Is this Naomi?" they asked, some perhaps recognizing her familiar features, yet noting the stark, heartbreaking change in her demeanor, the absence of joy in her eyes. Naomi's response, when it came, confirmed her bitter, desolate state. "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." Their return to Bethlehem, though a homecoming in name for Naomi, did not immediately alleviate their destitution, their crushing poverty. They were poor, without land, without a husband or sons to provide, and seemingly without any means of support. The future stretched before them, a landscape of uncertainty. Yet, even in the midst of this hardship, a small flicker of hope, a tiny ember of possibility, began to emerge, rooted in the ancient, often overlooked customs of Israel. It was the time of the barley harvest, a time of reaping and gathering, and the law of Moses, in its wisdom and grace, provided a specific provision for the poor, the widow, and the stranger, the right to glean. This meant they could humbly follow behind the harvesters in the vast, golden fields, carefully gathering the leftover stalks of grain that had fallen to the ground or been overlooked. It was a humble, physically demanding, and often demeaning task, but it offered them a means of survival, a way to provide for their daily needs, a thread of dignity in their destitution. Ruth, with her characteristic initiative, her unwavering devotion to Naomi, and a quiet determination that belied her foreign status, said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor." Naomi, perhaps recognizing the absolute necessity of this humble work, and trusting in Ruth's willingness and resourcefulness, simply replied, with a mixture of hope and resignation, "Go, my daughter." And so, Ruth set out early the next morning, stepping into the vast, sun-drenched fields of Bethlehem, her future entirely unknown, her fate seemingly dependent on the kindness of strangers, and, though she might not have fully realized it at that moment, on the guiding hand of divine providence, a hand that was already beginning to move in ways she could not yet see. Now, here's where the seemingly random act of gleaning, that humble, daily struggle for survival, reveals a deeper, purposeful design. The scripture tells us, with simplicity, "And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech." This wasn't mere coincidence, a fortunate accident. No, this was the quiet, meticulous work of God's faithfulness, subtly guiding Ruth's steps, setting the stage for a story of redemption that would ripple through generations. Boaz was no ordinary man in Bethlehem. He was a prominent figure, a man of considerable wealth and significant influence in the community. But more importantly, the Bible describes him as a worthy man, or as some translations beautifully render it, a man of valor. A term suggesting not just material prosperity or social standing, but a moral character, deep integrity, and a strong spiritual foundation. As he came out from Bethlehem, perhaps bathed in the morning sunlight, to inspect his vast fields and greet his reapers, his eyes fell upon Ruth. What did he see? Perhaps it was her quiet diligence amidst the busy workers, her graceful yet determined movements, her noticeable foreignness, or simply the radiant dignity with which she performed her humble task. He immediately inquired of his young man who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" The servant, already impressed by her dedication, explained that she was the Moabite woman who had returned with Naomi, and that she had diligently requested permission to glean, working tirelessly since morning. Boaz, already informed of Naomi's return and perhaps hearing whispers of Ruth's remarkable loyalty, then approached Ruth directly. His words to her were not just kind, but deeply protective and uncommonly generous, especially towards a foreign woman working alone. "Now listen, my daughter," he said, his voice warm with respect. "Do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn." This was an act of extraordinary grace. For a foreign woman, a Moabite who might otherwise have been vulnerable to harassment or exploitation, Boaz went far beyond the legal requirement of simply allowing her to glean. He offered her protection, a secure place to work among his own trusted servants, and full access to water and provisions, treating her with a respect and generosity that surely stood out in that time and place. Ruth was understandably overwhelmed by this unexpected kindness. She bowed down with her face to the ground, a gesture of gratitude and humility, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me when I am a foreigner?" Boaz's response to her question beautifully encapsulates the theme of God's faithfulness at work through human kindness, and reveals his deep spiritual insight. He said to her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." This acknowledgement was far more than polite conversation. It was a recognition of Ruth's radical faith and selfless love, a divine insight into her character. Boaz saw her deep commitment to Naomi, and crucially, her courageous decision to take refuge not just in a new land, but explicitly under the wings of the God of Israel. A powerful, comforting echo of promises found in the Psalms, like Psalm 91, speaking of divine protection. He was, perhaps unknowingly, becoming an immediate instrument of that very refuge and reward. Later that day, at mealtime, Boaz invited her to eat with him among his reapers, and even ensured she had more than enough food, instructing his men to deliberately leave extra grain for her to glean abundantly. This was the first tangible, overflowing sign of God's providence, a shining beacon of hope that was beginning to penetrate the despair, illuminating the path of redemption for these two desolate women. It powerfully demonstrates how God's faithfulness often works through the generous hearts and righteous actions of others, turning seemingly small acts of kindness into monumental blessings. Ruth returned to Naomi that evening, carrying a truly remarkable amount of barley. It was far, far more than a diligent gleaner could usually hope for, a tangible testament to Boaz's extraordinary kindness and generosity. Naomi, seeing the overflowing abundance and hearing of Boaz's graciousness towards Ruth, was greatly stirred. Her spirit, which had been so long dulled by pervasive grief and despair, began to perceive a distinct, undeniable hand of God at work, moving behind the scenes of their daily struggles. "Blessed be he by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead," she exclaimed, a true cry of hope escaping her lips. And then, As she connected the dots, the pieces of their broken future began to fall into place for her, a divinely orchestrated puzzle. "The man is a close relative of ours," she revealed to Ruth, her voice perhaps tinged with awe. "One of our redeemers." This revelation was more than just good news. It was a turning point. The concept of a redeemer, or goel in Hebrew, is utterly central to this story and to the very theme of redemption itself. In ancient Israel, a kinsman-redeemer was a close male relative who had a sacred, legal, and social duty to restore what was lost to a needy family member. This could mean buying back family land that had been sold due to poverty, avenging a death, or, as in Naomi and Ruth's desperate situation, marrying a childless widow to raise an heir for her deceased husband. This sacred duty prevented the family name and its precious inheritance from simply dying out from among Israel. For Naomi, Boaz was not just a kind landlord. He was their potential rescuer, the designated one who could restore their broken lineage, their lost property, and their utterly shattered hope. It was a lifeline extended by God through human custom. Naomi, now seeing a clear path forward, devised a bold plan rooted in deep wisdom, her intimate knowledge of cultural understanding, and her newfound trust in divine providence. She knew the timing was absolutely crucial at the very end of the harvest season, when Boaz, as a landowner, would be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. This was not merely a place of laborious work, but also a communal gathering point, a place where a man might rest, perhaps slightly unguarded, after long, exhausting days of labor. Naomi instructed Ruth precisely, every detail carefully considered. "Wash therefore and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor. Do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." This was an incredibly bold, even vulnerable, act for Ruth, requiring immense trust in Naomi's judgment, courage in her own heart, and unwavering faith in God's leading. It wasn't intended as a seductive act, but a deeply symbolic one, a customary and culturally understood way for a desperate widow to formally propose marriage to a kinsman-redeemer, indicating her desire for him to fulfill his duty and provide the needed restoration. Ruth, with her characteristic obedience, her quiet strength, and her great trust in Naomi's wisdom, responded simply and humbly, "All that you say I will do." So, in the hushed quiet of the night, with the moonlight perhaps casting long shadows, Ruth made her way down to the threshing floor. She watched as Boaz, his heart content and merry from the day's successful harvest, finished his meal. He then lay down by the heap of grain to sleep, a common practice to guard the valuable harvest. Stealthily, quietly, Ruth approached, uncovered his feet, and lay down there, a vulnerable yet determined appeal. In the unsettling middle of the night, Boaz was startled from his sleep. He stirred, turned over, and discovered, to his surprise, a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice surely filled with initial surprise, perhaps even a hint of alarm in the darkness. And Ruth, with a courage born of desperation and deep respect, replied with humility and clarity, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are a redeemer." The act of spreading one's cloak was a beautiful and powerful symbol in that culture. a public declaration of taking someone under one's protection, a formal claim of them as a spouse, a promise of shelter and provision. It was her way of asking him to fulfill his role as their Goel, their kinsman-redeemer. Boaz's response revealed his deep, honorable character once more, a true man of God. "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter," he said, his voice now filled with respect and admiration. "For you have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman." He called her a worthy woman, using the same descriptor, chael, that described him, indicating a woman of valor, of noble character, known for her excellence and strength. Her reputation for integrity, for selfless loyalty, and for her love had truly preceded her, recognized even in the quiet of that night. This encounter at the threshing floor was not just a private moment. It was the crucial turning point where the path to redemption became clear and actively pursued. Boaz, a man of his word, a man of unwavering integrity, and deeply aware of his sacred responsibilities as a kinsman-redeemer, didn't delay. The very next morning, with the dawn light breaking over Bethlehem, he went up to the city gate. This wasn't just an entrance. It was the vibrant heart of the community, the bustling marketplace, and crucially, the place of all public business, legal proceedings, and judicial decisions. It was where agreements were made, disputes settled, and justice administered, all in plain sight of the town's elders and citizens. There, with calm determination, he waited for the Goel, the closer kinsman-redeemer, the one who had the primary right to redeem Naomi's property and secure Ruth's future, to pass by. When the man, whose name is tellingly not recorded, arrived, Boaz addressed him formally, respectfully, but with clear intent. He gathered 10 elders of the city, venerable men whose presence would ensure the absolute legality and binding nature of the transaction. Naomi, who has come back from the land of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech, Boaz stated, laying out the situation clearly and publicly. He then presented the choice without coercion. "And I thought I should inform you and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I am next after you." The closer kinsman, hearing only the opportunity to acquire land, a tangible asset that would increase his own holdings and wealth, readily agreed without hesitation. "I will redeem it," he declared, perhaps with a sense of quiet satisfaction. However, Boaz, with meticulous fairness and foresight, then revealed the full extent of the obligation, the deeper responsibility that came with the redemption. "The day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi," Boaz clarified, his voice steady, "you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance." This changed everything. The kinsman's initial eagerness visibly dissolved. Faced now with the prospect of not only purchasing the land but also taking Ruth, a Moabite woman and a childless widow, as his wife, and potentially jeopardizing his own existing estate with the complexities of inheritance, he hesitated. The law stipulated that the firstborn son born to Ruth and him would inherit Elimelech's property, thus carrying on Elimelech's name, not the kinsman's own existing heirs. This was a significant financial and social consideration, a potential impairment to his own family's wealth and lineage. "I cannot redeem it for myself," the closer kinsman confessed with a tone of resignation, "lest I impair my own inheritance." "You redeem, for you have the right." And with this declaration, he performed a crucial symbolic act, a deeply ingrained legal custom used in ancient Israel to formalize the transfer of responsibility and rights. He took off his sandal and gave it to Boaz. This simple yet powerful gesture, witnessed by all the elders and the assembled people, publicly signified his relinquishing of his right to redeem both the land and, by extension, Ruth. As the narrator explains, now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel. Boaz, now rightfully free to act as the next in line, turned to the elders and all the people gathered at the gate, his voice ringing with clarity and purpose. "You are witnesses this day," he proclaimed, "that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to his sons. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day." The elders and the gathered people, recognizing the righteousness of Boaz's actions and the hope it carried, responded with a heartfelt blessing. "We are witnesses," they affirmed. "May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. And may you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem, and may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman." Their blessing powerfully linked Ruth to the matriarchs of Israel, acknowledging her significant role in God's unfolding plan. Thus, in a public, legally binding, and significant manner, Boaz redeemed both the land and Ruth, fulfilling his sacred duty as kinsman-redeemer. This act of redemption was not merely a shrewd legal transaction. It was an act of immense grace, of selfless love, and of faithful obedience to God's ancient law. It set the stage for the complete restoration of Naomi's broken family line and the wondrous unfolding of God's larger, redemptive plan for humanity. It was a testament to how God's faithfulness works through the intricate details of human relationships and legal obligations, weaving together a story of redemption that is both personal and cosmic in its scope. With the legal process completed, the complex mix of ancient law, custom, and personal integrity now perfectly woven, and his commitment to Ruth publicly declared before the elders of Bethlehem, Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Imagine the quiet, deep joy that must have finally settled over their new home, a joy built not on fleeting passion or hurried necessity, but on mutual respect, deep integrity, and a shared understanding of duty, faithfulness, and selfless love. Ruth, the foreign widow who had chosen radical loyalty to Naomi and sought refuge under the very wings of the God of Israel, now found not just security, but a truly loving and esteemed home within the heart of Bethlehem. And Boaz, the righteous man of worth, found a virtuous, devoted, and courageous partner, one whose character had already blessed him. And then, in the fullness of time, in his perfect timing, the Lord, who had meticulously orchestrated every step of this remarkable journey, opened Ruth's womb. She conceived, and to the joy of all, in due season, she bore a son. This was the miraculous culmination of the redemption, the visible, tangible fruit of unwavering faithfulness and divine providence. The women of Bethlehem, who had initially witnessed Naomi's sorrowful, empty return, now surrounded her, not with whispers of pity, but with shouts of joy and heartfelt celebration. Their voices filled with gladness, they exclaimed to Naomi, their words ringing with recognition of God's hand, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel." They continued their blessing, acknowledging the preciousness of this new life and the woman who brought it. "He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." This poignant statement highlights Ruth's extraordinary value in their eyes, surpassing even the cherished hope of many sons, a testament to her unwavering loyalty and sacrificial love. She had truly been more to Naomi than family, more than comfort. She had been the very instrument of her restoration. Naomi, whose heart had been bitter and empty for so long, who had once begged to be called Mara, bitter, now experienced a soul-deep transformation. The crushing emptiness that had defined her existence was filled to overflowing. The bitterness that had poisoned her spirit was dissolved by the pure sweetness of new life, renewed hope, and the tangible embrace of God's goodness. With trembling hands, filled with a joy she thought she'd never know again, she cradled her grandson, taking him tenderly into her arms, becoming his nurse and guardian, pouring out all her pent-up love. The women of the community, in a beautiful act of communal blessing and prophetic naming, called the child Obed. The name Obed means serving or worshiping, a fitting and beautiful name for a child born from a story so rich in service, in faithfulness, and in worship of the sovereign God. This child, Obed, born of Ruth the Moabite and Boaz the Israelite, was far, far more than just a beloved son to them. He was the future, a living testament to God's expansive plan. Obed grew and in time became the father of Jesse, and Jesse in turn became the father of David, the great King David of Israel, through whom the royal line was established. And through David's royal lineage, centuries later, from the very same town of Bethlehem, would come the Messiah, Jesus Christ, the ultimate kinsman-redeemer for all humanity. What began in utter destitution, deep despair, and the threat of an extinct family line in a foreign land was, by God's faithful hand and through extraordinary human kindness, transformed into a lineage of royalty, a story of salvation that stretches across millennia. The story of Ruth and Boaz concludes not just with a joyous marriage and the miracle of a birth, but with the complete, beautiful, and utterly unexpected restoration of Naomi, from emptiness to fullness, from bitterness to blessing, from despair to dancing joy. It stands as a living testament to the limitless power of redemption in action, a divine promise fulfilled. As we bring our commentary on the timeless story of Ruth and Boaz to a close, let's allow the powerful, comforting lessons woven into this narrative to settle deep within our hearts, to truly offer us that sacred moment of peace, reflection, and spiritual rest that we so often long for. The narrative of Ruth and Boaz is, at its core, a magnificent, enduring testament to God's unwavering faithfulness, even in the deepest wells of hardship. We witnessed Naomi experience truly profound, soul-crushing loss. She arrived home in Bethlehem not just empty-handed, but empty-hearted, carrying nothing but overwhelming grief and a bitter spirit, believing the Almighty had dealt harshly with her. Yet, even in her lament, Even in the silent suffering she endured, God was meticulously, sovereignly at work behind the scenes, weaving his divine plan. He quietly used the unwavering loyalty of a foreign Moabite widow, the gracious, ancient custom of gleaning, and the sterling integrity of a righteous Israelite man, Boaz, to orchestrate a miraculous, beautiful turnaround. This incredible narrative serves as a gentle, yet powerful, reminder that our own hardships, our own moments of despair, are never, ever outside of God's watchful eye. Even when our circumstances seem utterly bleak, when we feel empty, lost, or forgotten, His loving providence is always creating hope and purpose, even if we cannot perceive it at the moment. He doesn't always remove the difficulty immediately, or in the way we expect, but He is faithful in the difficulty, often working through unexpected channels, through the quiet kindness of others, or through our own humble acts of quiet obedience and trust. Then, consider the radiant example of Ruth's love and loyalty. Her famous declaration to Naomi, etched forever in Scripture, "Where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God," wasn't just a promise spoken in a moment of emotion. It was a great act of faith, a radical commitment to a new God, abandoning everything she had ever known, her homeland, her family, her cultural gods, for an utterly uncertain future. This selfless love, born out of deep devotion and courage, ultimately paved the way for her own unimaginable redemption and became an overflowing blessing, a very lifeline, to Naomi. It gently challenges each of us to reflect on the depth of our own commitments, our loyalty to God, and to those He has placed in our lives, even when the path ahead is unclear, demanding, or seemingly impossible. True loyalty, often quiet, unassuming, and persevering, can unlock unforeseen blessings and become a powerful, living testament to the divine at work through us. They continued their blessing, acknowledging the preciousness of this new life and the woman who brought it. "He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." This poignant statement highlights Ruth's extraordinary value in their eyes, surpassing even the cherished hope of many sons, a testament to her unwavering loyalty and sacrificial love. She had truly been more to Naomi than family, more than comfort. She had been the very instrument of her restoration. Naomi, whose heart had been bitter and empty for so long, who had once begged to be called Mara, bitter, now experienced a soul-deep transformation. The crushing emptiness that had defined her existence was filled to overflowing. The bitterness that had poisoned her spirit was dissolved by the pure sweetness of new life, renewed hope, and the tangible embrace of God's goodness. With trembling hands, filled with a joy she thought she'd never know again, she cradled her grandson, taking him tenderly into her arms, becoming his nurse and guardian, pouring out all her pent-up love. The women of the community, in a beautiful act of communal blessing and prophetic naming, called the child Obed. The name Obed means serving or worshiping, a fitting and beautiful name for a child born from a story so rich in service, in faithfulness, and in worship of the sovereign God. This child, Obed, born of Ruth the Moabite and Boaz the Israelite, was far, far more than just a beloved son to them. He was the future, a living testament to God's expansive plan. Obed grew and in time became the father of Jesse, and Jesse in turn became the father of David, the great King David of Israel, through whom the royal line was established. And through David's royal lineage, centuries later, from the very same town of Bethlehem, would come the Messiah, Jesus Christ, the ultimate kinsman-redeemer for all humanity. What began in utter destitution, deep despair, and the threat of an extinct family line in a foreign land was, by God's faithful hand and through extraordinary human kindness, transformed into a lineage of royalty, a story of salvation that stretches across millennia. The story of Ruth and Boaz concludes not just with a joyous marriage and the miracle of a birth, but with the complete, beautiful, and utterly unexpected restoration of Naomi, from emptiness to fullness, from bitterness to blessing, from despair to dancing joy. It stands as a living testament to the limitless power of redemption in action, a divine promise fulfilled.